I used to believe that communication, influence, and anything truly meaningful had to be encapsulated in words. This was an unshakable conviction, reinforced over years in a noisy world filled with instructions. Knowledge, I thought, needed to be conveyed clearly, articulately, in the form of detailed lectures and specific guidelines. We were taught to speak up, to debate, to express our thoughts fluently, to effect change. Everyone around me seemed to be in a race to speak more, to speak louder, so their voice wouldn't drown in the sea of information. I was no exception. Every day, I meticulously arranged my words, searching for the optimal way to express myself, to ensure my message was fully received. This belief shaped how I perceived every relationship, every interaction, every lesson in life. It was deeply ingrained, an unwritten rule. I relentlessly honed my speaking skills, believing it was the key to success and to having my worth understood by others. But then, Mr. Harrison appeared, and he melted away everything I thought I knew about how people influence one another. He didn't need eloquent speeches nor polished presentations, and he didn't even need to open his mouth. His mere presence, that alone, was a profound lesson, an invisible power I had never imagined. It was a shock to my entire ideology, a sudden shift so profound I had to re-evaluate the very foundations of my understanding of life and human nature. He didn't use words to convey his message. He used his very being, a way of life that stood in stark contrast to everything I had been taught. This left me bewildered, and at the same time, incredibly curious. That day began, seemingly, like any other. I opened my eyes knowing I'd once again face a monotonous routine, a predictable schedule with nothing unexpected or exciting. The midday sun was already fiercely hot, promising a grueling day of labor under its scorching rays. I buried my head in the familiar casp trimming the hedge. This hedge seemed endless, its green branches growing so rapidly that sometimes I felt like I was battling a perpetually regenerating organism. Each snip of the shears was a repetitive, dull, and exhausting motion. The sharp blades cut through the foliage, creating a steady rustling sound, blending with the hum of the hedge trimmer. Sweat began to stream down, clinging to the back of my neck, seeping deeply through the coarse fabric of my work shirt. I felt the shirt grow heavy and damp, sticking uncomfortably to my skin, creating a suffocating sensation. My lower back ached persistently, and my arms felt leaden after hours of lifting and lowering the machine. Every movement required effort, and I felt my body gradually becoming worn out, heavy as lead. The pungent fumes of gasoline from the hedge trimmer mingled with the dry, grassy scent, forming an unpleasant mixture that permeated every breath I took, clinging to my clothes and hair. I struggled to take deep breaths, my chest feeling constricted. Exhaustion gradually enveloped my mind, forming a heavy, dark cloud in my head. All thoughts seemed suppressed, blurred by the sheer physical fatigue. My body, in those moments, was no longer truly my own. It had transformed into a mere machine, mindless, automatic. I just did, without a single thought, without a single emotion. Just endless, repetitive motions. The internal clock in my head simply counted down the minutes until I could put the machine down, even for a moment. I yearned for rest, longed to escape this endless loop. And then, amidst this weary and monotonous landscape, Mr. Harrison appeared. He didn't emerge suddenly or with any fanfare. He was simply there, on his usual low wooden chair, beneath the ancient oak tree that had stood for hundreds of years. The gnarled, massive trunk of the oak was like a sturdy wall, creating a cool, shaded area, completely separated from the scorching sun where I labored. His wide-brimmed straw hat obscured most of his face, revealing only a hint of his chin and a faint, almost imperceptible smile. Sunlight filtered through the dense foliage, creating dancing patterns of light on his straw hat, painting shimmering, ethereal designs. The air beneath the tree seemed cooler, fresher, like a completely different world. In his hand was an old but clean ceramic teacup, from which a thin wisp of steam gently rose, dissolving into the hot, humid midday air, carrying a faint herbal scent. He made no movements, did nothing at all, at least not in the way I understood doing. He wasn't checking a smartphone, that almost indispensable device of our era. He wasn't reading a newspaper or a book, wasn't watching TV, and he didn't even glance at me working. At least I didn't feel his gaze fixed upon me. He just sat there, completely still, without a sound, without a superfluous movement. His stillness wasn't idleness, wasn't laziness. It was a stillness with purpose, with intention. He sat there, as if simply sitting were a paramount task, a responsibility he was executing perfectly. Every moment he sat, he seemed to be listening, observing, immersing himself in the surrounding space in the most complete way possible. His stillness, to me at that time, was perplexing, even irritating, a contrast too great to comprehend, and I hated it. I hated how calmly he sat there, almost nonchalantly, as if everything in the world was perfectly in its place, needing no alteration or improvement. As if life held no urgency, no battles to fight, no deadlines to meet. Meanwhile, I was relentlessly struggling. I fought every stubborn blade of grass, every burning drop of sweat on my skin, every aching muscle fiber after hours of labor. Every breath was labored, every movement a struggle. I felt torn between the necessity of work and the desperate desire for rest. His stillness, in my eyes then, felt nothing short of a quiet insult to all the effort and hardship I was enduring. It was an irony from another world, a peace I couldn't explain amidst my own chaos. The question spun endlessly in my head, repeating like an inescapable loop. Why doesn't he have to rush like me? Why doesn't he have to work tirelessly like I do? What is he doing while I'm exhausted from work? What purpose does his life have if he just sits there? Each question felt like a knife twisting in my mind, intensifying my frustration and bewilderment about Mr. Harrison and about my own life. I simply couldn't reconcile such a stark contrast between two extremes of existence. It made me feel unfair, and above all, it made me feel left behind. A sense of helplessness crept in. The frustration, the sheer fatigue, would surge in waves, threatening to drown me in a sense of despair. But then, like a lightning bolt piercing the darkness, something shifted. During a short break, I let the heavy hedge trimmer drop onto the hot, dry ground, its familiar engine sputtering into silence, giving way to an unexpected quiet. That moment of stillness, however brief, was enough for me to take a deep breath, feeling my lungs expand with cleaner air, a stark contrast to the pungent gasoline fumes. I grabbed my water bottle, already warm from the sun, tilted it back, and took a long, hurried gulp. My throat was dry and raw, as if I'd just journeyed through a desert. The water slid down, bringing a small measure of relief, soothing the uncomfortable sensation that had plagued me all morning. As the last drops lingered on my lips, I unconsciously glanced around. My gaze swept across Mr. Harrison's yard, a surprisingly green and pristine landscape. Everything was meticulously cared for, like a living work of art. From the hedges, trimmed so neatly and sharply, they looked as if drawn with a ruler, to the carefully tended flower beds, where not a single weed dared to sprout. Not a fallen leaf, not a dry twig. Everything exuded an unusual sense of order and tidiness. And then something strange clicked in my mind, like a ray of light cutting through the fog of my fatigue and prejudice. Although he sat there almost every day in the same posture, with the same teacup, I began to realize that something always changed. These weren't grand, immediately obvious changes, but subtle, small details that were immensely valuable. Something meaningful was always created from his quiet presence. This realization didn't come abruptly, but slowly, like grains of sand filling an hourglass. It began with a fleeting memory from the day before. I recalled seeing him in his shed, a place usually cluttered with my own old discarded gardening tools. He was carefully cleaning the air vents of an old lawnmower that I'd assumed was completely broken, just waiting to be thrown away. He gently disassembled each part of it, every tiny screw, every small dust filter, meticulously placing them on a clean cloth. His wrinkled but steady hands meticulously dusted each tiny component with astonishing precision and care, as if he were performing complex surgery on a precious patient. Every movement he made exuded respect and a deep understanding of the machine. At the time, I thought it was a waste of time. Why not just buy a new one? Money wasn't an issue for him. That was clear. He could easily replace it with the latest, most modern lawnmower. But now, before my very eyes, that machine purred like new, powerful, and smooth, as if it had just rolled off the assembly line. Its steady hum, without a single rattle or stutter, was the clearest testament to his dedication. That incident made me think, not just about the lawnmower, but about the way he treated everything. It was a selfless kind of care, an investment in what he already had, rather than constantly seeking something new. And that wasn't the only time. The memory of the day before that also flooded back. He was tidying his garden tools, not hastily, not rushing, but meticulously, down to the smallest detail. Each pair of shears, each clip, each small shovel was placed precisely in its designated spot on the sturdy wall rack. They were polished until they gleamed, the metallic glint sparkling in the light, ready for their next use. The perfect alignment and metallic sheen of his tools contrasted sharply with the patchy rust on my own, which I always tossed into a corner after each use, without a second thought. Meanwhile, my own shears were rusting, buried in a heap of dry leaves and messy junk, forgotten and uncared for. This contrast struck me hard. It wasn't just about gardening or tool care. It was about an approach to life, an attitude towards what one possesses, and an attention to even the smallest details. And today, he was just sitting, but once again, I realized he was sitting with purpose. It wasn't passivity nor idleness. It was a conscious act, a choice. He wasn't sitting merely to rest, but to be fully present, to observe the world around him with profound depth. His stillness wasn't empty. It contained something that I, though unable to articulate, had begun to feel. It was a silent power, slowly seeping into my mind, challenging every definition of busyness and efficiency I had ever held. It was a quiet testament to the power of simply being with one's full presence, rather than just doing unconsciously like a machine. From initially hating his peacefulness, I began to find a strange fascination. A new question began to form in my mind. Could it be that in that stillness, in that doing nothing, there lay some secret I had missed throughout my own hurried life? This question was no longer born of irritation, but of genuine curiosity, a desire to understand. I no longer saw Mr. Harrison as a symbol of detestable idleness, but as an enigma to be solved. Every slow movement, every calm gesture of his became a clue, a hint at a different way of living, a philosophy I had never been taught. His stillness, once an insult, now became a mysterious invitation. The blazing midday sun and the insistent hum of the hedge trimmer still echoed somewhere in my ears. But now, my mind was entirely focused on Mr. Harrison. Every one of his actions, no matter how small, became an object for me to observe and contemplate. The way he placed his old yet clean ceramic teacup on the stone table, a movement that produced no sound whatsoever, not a single clink or the slightest clash. The absolute silence of that action made me hold my breath. It wasn't an effort to suppress a sound, but a natural gentleness, as if the teacup and the stone table had been in perfect harmony from the beginning. Then he gently tilted his head upwards. His gaze didn't flit hastily across his surroundings. It settled on the ancient oak's canopy. He watched the sunlight filter through the gaps in the leaves, creating shimmering light patterns dancing on the ground. He wasn't just looking around, as I often did to entertain myself during breaks. He was observing, as if admiring the grandest painting, a masterpiece of nature, with complete focus and reverence. Every ray of sunlight, every single leaf, seemed to be fully absorbed by him. The way he sat upright, yet without any tension or stiffness in his posture. His shoulders were completely relaxed, as if no burden weighed him down. His entire body seemed to understand that this moment mattered, that every second, every breath deserved to be honored, to be fully lived. There was no impatience, no anxiety about what needed to be done next, only pure presence in the current moment. This wasn't laziness. Absolutely not. This was presence. It was a profound embodiment of living fully in the now, undistracted by the past or anxious about the future. Mr. Harrison wasn't passive. He was utterly conscious of every moment, every tiny detail of life unfolding around him. His stillness wasn't empty. It was filled with mindfulness and awareness. I began to realize a simple truth that I had missed throughout my hurried life. He was never in a hurry. Never frantic, never rushing through a packed schedule. But what was even more surprising is that he also never wasted a second. Every action he took, no matter how small, carried weight, carried intention. Even if that action was simply his stillness, his quiet sitting, stillness didn't mean doing nothing. For Mr. Harrison, stillness was doing everything consciously. It was a philosophy of life. While I was racing against time, chasing vague goals, he remained calm, unhurried. That made me wonder, how can someone do so little, yet seem so full of joy, of peace, of meaning? And an even deeper question resonated in my mind. How is it that he doesn't need to race against time, doesn't need to chase after vague goals, and yet he's not left behind? If anything, he's ahead of me. He was ahead of me in his peacefulness, in his contentment with life, in his deep understanding of what truly matters. He didn't need to have more to feel enough. It was the first time I questioned not money, social status, or material achievements. For the first time, I questioned a way of living. This was a revelation, a realization that true wealth doesn't lie in the accumulation of riches, in the money in a bank account, or in the things one can flaunt externally. Instead, it lies in the intention behind every action, every moment we live. True wealth lies in appreciating what is present, in the ability to find meaning in the simplest things, in connecting deeply with oneself and the surrounding world. It's an invisible kind of wealth, immeasurable by material means, yet it brings profound satisfaction. For the first time in my life, I stopped judging him by his outward results, his bank account, his age, his quiet, somewhat puzzling demeanor. I realized those were just superficial aspects, not reflective of his entire being. I began observing him not to criticize, not to find fault, not to prove myself right and him wrong. My purpose entirely shifted. I observed to understand, to grasp something rare, a kind of wisdom I had never encountered before, never been taught in any school. It was a wisdom that transcended words, transcended conventional frameworks. The old man didn't utter a single word, but his silence was not empty. On the contrary, it echoed like a bell in my mind, ringing again and again, stirring thoughts I had kept deeply hidden, fears and desires I had never dared to face. It was a silent lesson, a reminder that not everything valuable needs to be said out loud. Not every truth needs to be declared with flowery words. Some of life's deepest truths are found in the unspoken, in moments of stillness, in authentic presence. His silence was a language of its own, a language of peace and wisdom. It didn't need words to convey its message, for it directly touched my soul, my very essence. It taught me that sometimes listening to what isn't said is the most important thing of all. I realized that I had lived in an overly noisy world, where everyone tried to fill every void with sound, with words, with incessant activity. And in that noise, I had lost the ability to hear my own inner voice, and the voice of other important things that didn't need words. Mr. Harrison had opened a new door, a different world, where value isn't measured by hurriedness, but by stillness and consciousness. And then, something truly strange happened. It wasn't an epiphany or a sudden burst of enlightenment. Instead, it unfolded slowly, subtly, like a seed planted in the earth, silently germinating and growing. I started learning, but not from spoken wisdom, not from lectures or direct instructions. I learned from what was unsaid, from small gestures, from Mr. Harrison's quiet and intentional presence. It was a completely new form of education for me, an absorption of knowledge through observation and deep feeling. That evening, after a long day of work, I went home. My body was still utterly exhausted, every muscle aching as if on strike. I dragged myself into the house, the lingering smell of sweat and dry grass clinging to me. But surprisingly, my mind was no longer plagued by meaningless fatigue as it usually was. Instead, it was filled with thoughts, with images of Mr. Harrison, of his stillness and his purposeful actions. It was a physical tiredness, but my spirit was awake, energized, and full of new questions. I went directly to my shed, a place where I usually just tossed my tools carelessly. My eyes landed on my old garden shears, a simple tool I often haphazardly threw into a dusty corner filled with dry leaves after each use. They were rusty, caked with dirt and grime, a true reflection of my lack of care. For the first time in my life, I didn't pick up those shears to use them or to discard them. Instead, I picked them up to clean them. I grabbed an old rag and began to scrub the stubborn dirt clinging to the body of the shears. I carefully used my fingers to wipe away each patch of orange rust, little by little, as if discovering a forgotten treasure. Then I took a softer cloth and began to polish every inch of the blade. The cold metal felt different in my hands. It was no longer just a mindless tool, a mere object for completing a task. Now it was an extension of my newfound intention, a symbol of the small but significant change occurring within me. The sensation of cleaning and polishing the shears was peculiar. It wasn't a chore. On the contrary, It was almost a meditative act. With each speck of dirt removed, each spot of rust cleaned, I felt a deeper connection to this object, and even more, to myself. It wasn't an obligation. It was an act of care, an expression of respect. I did all of this not because anyone told me to. Mr. Harrison wasn't standing beside me, guiding or instructing. Nor was it because I thought anyone would notice or praise me for this small act. No material reward was promised. There simply wasn't any external motivation at all. It was simply because he had done it. Mr. Harrison had taken the time to care for his tools, to preserve them, to respect them. And somehow, deep down, I wanted to do the same. I wanted that level of care, that meticulousness in every aspect of my life. I wanted that respect for the tools I used, no matter how simple they were. And above all, I wanted that appreciation for what I already had, instead of constantly chasing after what I didn't possess. It was an intrinsic desire, a shift in core values. I realized this appreciation applied not only to garden tools, but to everything in my life, from relationships to time, and even the seemingly most trivial moments. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the dark ceiling. The physical fatigue was still there, but it was no longer a meaningless burden tormenting my mind as it had on previous nights. Instead, a strange sense of peace seeped into my soul. I no longer felt empty or hopelessly drained. Instead, a new question appeared in my mind, much softer, yet deeper than any question I had ever asked before. It didn't demand an immediate answer, but rather an invitation to contemplate, to explore. Could it be that, amid all the noise of life, the rushed advice from others, the external expectations weighing on my shoulders, the endless race to achieve vague goals, what I truly needed to hear wasn't words, but silence? The silence of someone who had found profound peace and purpose in their own stillness? This question wasn't an accusation. It was a discovery. It opened up a new possibility, a different path I had never considered. It allowed me to reevaluate my entire life, my priorities, and what I was truly seeking. I slowly closed my eyes, and for the first time in a very long time, I felt a fragile, yet powerful and quiet hope. It wasn't a grand, noisy hope, but a small ray of light filtering through a crack in the door, enough to dispel the darkness. That maybe, just maybe, there is another way to live, to work, and to be. A path where full presence is true power, where quiet, unspoken intention speaks volumes more than any eloquent speech. It was a path leading to inner peace, to contentment, and to a life of deeper meaning. It was the first seed of a profound transformation.